All right, everybody, happy June. We're back for another episode of the Closing Table. My friend and Hartford Whalers fan himself, the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, and especially the man behind Next Home Brandywine. Here he is, Dan. What's going
Number
on, Dan the
seven.
man?
Good evening. We just had a nice talk before we went live.
Up, 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 up. There we
Number
go.
seven here we are on this week. Yes, notice my Hartford Whalers gear. My son and I just went to New York to the NHL store and had a good time. Got some stuff. I see
That's
Bayway's wearing his Flyers hat over there. Danny just got a new Flyers jersey.
nice.
Don't ask how much that was. Uh, Fresh back from New York yesterday, dove back into the craziness of the real estate market this morning. We have Ernie Homer coming up, Homer Inspection Services, and we're going to talk about the importance of a home inspection this month. It's very important. If you have questions, put them up there, and we'll hopefully get them answered. So, what's happening? Anything new?
Just trying to make it to tomorrow.
That's what we're talking about. It's very volatile in a lot of different segments of the economy. The real estate's the same way. 6% interest rates as of today. I just had a guy that got pre-approved maybe 3 weeks ago at 5.3%. Today he went back to get an updated pre-approval, 6%. That's a lot. 0.7 on your loan could be $100, $150 a month. So make sure you are getting an updated pre-approval and an estimated cost sheet from your realtor before you head out, just so you're armed with the latest numbers and you know what your monthly payment is going to look like. It's very volatile right now. It's not your mortgage broker's fault or your realtor's fault what the interest rate is. We don't control it, unfortunately. So
Right.
we're just giving you what the current market is bearing. Still looking for uh, new construction, and there's still a lot of buyers out there looking to buy. Inventory starting to creep up because the buyers are starting to be a little more discerning regarding the prices. When they see it on paper with this increased rate, a lot of people are being a little tepid, a little hesitant because of they just don't think they're going to be able to afford it in conjunction with the food cost. Me and Bay were just talking about him possibly coming up to Philadelphia for a visit, and it would cost them $1,000 to come up.
Just in gas.
Yeah, and gas just to get up here and back, based down in Tennessee. So all that economic factor, all the economic factors are finding their way into different segments, including the real estate market. So make sure you have a professional realtor that's arming you with the information you need. It's key. And if you're listing your home, I've been on there today looking for listings. Everybody wants to try to sell, right? Because they're hoping to get out before this thing kind of potentially goes south a little bit. Make sure that your realtor is doing her due diligence for you and putting up professional pictures.
Hmm.
I've seen some of the worst photography I've ever seen. Make sure they're presenting your property correctly for sale. There's 39,000 agents in our region. Make sure they're working on your behalf. Again, my team, NextHomeBrandywine.com, we demand it. We work on service level. That's it. I can't compete with Berkshire, volume, any of that, but we can compete on service level, and we can compete on our products and services and our commitment to you, the consumer, whether you're buying or selling. So, do we have Ernie yet?
We do. Real quick, I want to ask a question, though. Um, I've had a few friends and family members recently within the past couple months who renting houses, and the landlord turned around and same scenario. The landlord turned around and said, "We decided we're selling the house
Yes.
because we want to cash in now before the
Yes.
market drops." Are
Well,
you seeing that a lot?
especially in high uh, condensed rental market areas such as Coatesville. And it's a working class neighborhood. And what's happening is they're not giving the tenant the proper notice. They're saying
Right.
they did it to Joseph's bus driver. They're saying, "Hey, I'm selling the property. You got to get out.
Mm-hmm.
We might do a show on that. We might do a caveat show because we can talk about leases.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right as a consumer and what the landlord / homeowner has to tell you if they're selling the property. We're seeing that. But here's the problem. I have a guy ready, willing, and able to buy.
Right.
He wants to buy a rental property. He's a head technician over at Dell Toyota. Nothing's reasonable. They're trying to get ridiculous money. And general rule of thumb is 10 times rents for rental properties. So, you see something that rents for 1,000, the house should sell for about 100, 110,000. They're asking 160.
Wow.
So they're trying to gouge the consumer because they know that people want to pick up rental properties because the rental incomes are going up. I'll tell you one more thing. We'll bring Ernie on. So my mom's gentleman friend guy moved into one of those executive style apartment rentals, condos in the region. They're putting a lot of them up.
Okay.
He paid $2,150 last year, and he was talking to some of the people that their renewals up. They're trying to jack them. They're trying to put them up to like $2,400. So everybody's trying to gouge on the rental market because they know people are having trouble finding a home to purchase. Mm-hmm. So there's no way that Hankin and all these groups didn't put up all these rental buildings, these executive style rentals. A 3-bedroom based $3,000. $3,000.
Unbelievable.
I moved to my house 20 years ago. I paid $165,000, and my mortgage is $1,200 a month. My niece is paying $1,950 for a 1-bedroom apartment. How are they going to have the money to buy homes? Me and you couldn't do it.
No.
You're paying $3,000 a month for an apartment or $2,400 a month for a 2-bedroom. It's hard.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And people are doing everything and anything to get into a house. And that's why I wanted Ernie on to talk about the protections for the buyers because the leverage has been in the seller's court.
Well, let's get him on. He's waiting patiently here. All right. Here he is, the man of the hour.
There he is.
Mr. Ernie Homer of Homer Home Inspections. How you doing, Ern?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Doing good.
Look at that 5-star mustache he's got. Huh?
Dan, you got to move yourself over a little bit to the center. You're cut off.
Let's get here. How's that? A little
there
better?
You go. That's
there
better.
we go. I'm not cut off now. How can I be cut off? I'm too big to be cut off.
Yeah, man. Come on.
Ernie, appreciate you, buddy, for coming on.
Yeah.
So Ernie and I met about 3 years ago or so when I had my office in Downingtown. We were unhappy with our original in-house home inspector because we didn't think they were providing the service level that we demanded and we wanted for our clients. So I had seen a lot about Ernie in the area, in the Downingtown area, and Ernie stopped in to see us, and we've had a great relationship. And there's been a ton of talk, including by me, about home inspections and everything that's going on right now in this current market. And I wanted to bring Ernie on to talk about that. So, Ern, why don't you just do a little infomercial for yourself? Kind of just give us a little background. Ernie was with a few other inspection services before he decided to open his own Homer Inspection Services. How long's it been, Ernie? About 8-9 months?
So it was December 2020 is when I launched.
You gotta be kidding. Has it really been 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh, my, Ernie. I'm losing it. So, Ern, tell us about you, your background. I can say off the bat that Ernie's the right guy in the inspection industry, just what he brings to the table and how he conducts himself with home inspections. But Ernie, I'll leave the floor to you, and then we can go into some Q&A here. And again, I do appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for the intro. So I've been in the industry for going on 10 years now. I came from a completely different background than some guys, not being directly related to the trades. I was actually an analyst for a large bank. But most of my experience I gained growing up with a father who owned and operated construction companies. And so, I was around a lot of the trades for most of my life, and just kind of decided that I didn't really want to work that hard, doing the grueling construction work, and went a different path. So after college, I kicked around some different things. And then ultimately, I found this industry through a Google search. I was looking for a career that would, give me some freedom and some creative relief. And so I came across something that, an article that basically talked about home inspectors and how they're in high demand and how there's a shortage of skilled, folks in the industry, et cetera. And decided I would do some research and kind of jump into it. And ultimately I came across someone locally that was hiring and got hired and just learned. So it took several years to get enough experience and education to, be proficient, but I never turned back, and I'm still doing it.
Talk about your inspection report, because I think that's, to put it in layman's terms and to be able to provide a report that's easily readable to the consumer that doesn't overwhelm them. When you went on your own, you created your own inspection report that you hand out after your inspections are done and kind of detail what you saw. Just talk about that a little bit. I think it's key. Me and you talk about it a lot, and I want to go into a little bit of conversation regarding that around separating maintenance items, safety items, and things that really need to be done. But I find your communication and your reporting to be top notch.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the secret really is not a secret, which is just to be really straightforward in what you're trying to communicate. So I've just sort of developed a report where when I make observations or recommendations, it's going to be something that's really clear and concise. It's going to contain a few critical pieces of information. One, what is the concern? What is the problem that I've identified? What are the implications to it? So why is it relevant? Why is it important? Why is it a concern? And then what you should do about it. So, when I construct a recommendation or an observation in my report, it should contain those three things, which would give the client and their agents and any other third parties a really clear idea of what the issue is and what should be done to correct it. And then I include pictures and other pieces of information to sort of illustrate it a little more clearly for somebody who may not be there to see it firsthand.
Let's talk a little bit further about that. About probably it's in the client. They hire you, right? So you're an independent third-party inspector. You're hired in most instances on the buyer side to do an independent inspection on a property.
Right.
Should the client that hires you in most instances, will they benefit by staying with you for the entire inspection? Because I notice a lot of people hire a home inspector and they just let them go through the house and they don't go with them. And just little tiny things about finding that, like at my house, one of my GFIs in my whole bathroom controls several other GFIs in the house. Little tiny things people can learn about the property before they purchase it if they stay with the home inspector during the home inspection.
Yeah, I think, I would say most clients do choose to do that and sort of shadow me during the process. I do think it's important because, while I try to document everything in writing, there's going to be a lot that I observe and comment on that may not be written. And so it's their opportunity to learn about the property, learn about their house and how to maintain it, and I just think that it's probably their best opportunity before they get to the settlement table to really, see the house and learn about it. You're just in and out so quickly when you're doing showings and your walkthroughs that, when you're there for 3 hours to do an inspection, and you can really learn a lot about the property that you wouldn't otherwise know.
On a side note, we did an inspection in South Philadelphia 2 years ago, 3-story townhome, row home there, right by Rittner Street, 15th and Rittner there. It was windy as hell. And Ernie said, hold this ladder while I climb on the roof and check this roof out. I was nervous wreck down there trying to hold that ladder. I was praying, dear Lord, don't let him fall off this ladder. We've done a few things differently, right, Ernie? So we've introduced some drone for situations like that. So tell us a little bit about some of the newer stuff. The drone, I know you use the infrared to try to detect moisture at properties. Some of the few things that might separate you from the average home inspector.
Yeah, I think those are probably the two best pieces of technology that have come to the market recently, where a lot of inspectors are starting to deploy those. The infrared's really good because it's really useful for finding hidden issues, specifically moisture damage and other things that may or may not really be visible even to a trained eye. So that's a tool that is really, I think it helps lower my liability as an inspector because it gives me the ability to do a more thorough inspection, and I think it from the client's perspective too, they feel like it has benefit to it, and that you're as the inspector, you're giving them value for the job that you're doing. The drone, yeah, there's going to be instances where a roof is just not really
Safe.
accessible via ladder. It's not safe to really walk on it, or even sometimes put a ladder up to get a closer look at it. And so that's a tool that, that gives you the ability to get a pretty good look at some of the sketchier, steeper, roofs that you wouldn't otherwise. So, I try to, what's that?
Sorry, we talked about the liability. I want to expand on that a little bit later. Go ahead. I want to ask you another question too when it comes to the stucco.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyway, so as far as the drone, I mean, we still try to get a primary visible inspection, but in some instances you just can't do that, and that's where the technology comes in to make it safer and easier.
So, Bay, I'm going to ask one more question, and Julie said make sure you give Bay time to jump in. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-listing inspections because I want to talk about the current market, and most people, unfortunately, are waiving home inspections. But I want to talk about the stucco for a minute because I've come across it, and I think I actually just lost a listing because I give people real information, and sometimes they don't want to hear it. Do you suggest in the newer homes with the newer stucco, if you're going to list your home and you don't want to do the invasive stucco test, would you suggest, and we'll talk about the pre-listing inspections, but would you suggest somebody do the infrared just to get an idea if they may or may not have a problem with the stucco?
I
don't want to
that
put you on a stop there, but
I think that it's really difficult to assess moisture issues in stucco using infrared. It is possible, and I've seen some folks do that, but it's difficult because you have to have ideal environmental conditions to really get any kind of useful information from that. So the invasive moisture testing is really the only, I would say it's the best way to see if you've got issues that are not visible.
Bay, you have a question?
Yeah, so I worked in the car industry for like 13 years, and a lot of times after people trade their cars in, you get into these cars like fresh when they trade it in, and you think to yourself, my Lord, I can only imagine what these people's homes look like. So as an inspector, have you had horror stories where you walk into people's homes and you like, this house isn't even safe. Like you can't, there's no way this house is passing inspection.
Yeah, all the time. I've walked in and there's, you can see daylight through the roof. I've walked in and there's been squatters, asleep.
Really?
Oh yeah, all kinds of crazy.
Tell them
stuff.
about the one we had in Lancaster, Ern. We had an old historic house, and I had Amish clients, and the heater was vented through a fireplace in the basement. Remember that one, Ern?
Yeah, it was just total nonsense.
Ernie's like, this is interesting. So the heater actually literally vented into the fireplace and out the fireplace chimney.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's the homeowner special. Harry, the homeowner, made that, and thought it was a good idea, but
Let's talk a minute about. We had a historic house about a year ago, December, so it's about 18 months, maybe, the one we did in Honeybrook. And there's a lot of things with historic houses that are grandfathered that you necessarily can't or aren't going to change because of the cost factor and maybe the build of the house. This was a funeral parlor that was converted to a bed and breakfast and then to a residence. And Ernie was doing his due diligence and just pointing some things out on the inspection regarding what's code today and what maybe is grandfathered in these historic houses that were built in the 1800s. Is it hard to articulate, Ern, in a house, in an older house? You remember that house, I'm sure, and
Oh, yeah.
like a 3-page reply to inspection. And me and you had a conversation. He said a lot of that was just stuff for informational purposes for the buyer, and it wasn't necessarily something that was a hazard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about maintenance related items, especially, they're gonna it's going to be two completely different situations when you're dealing with an old house like that and a newer home. I think that, as an inspector, where there's no gray areas when it comes to safety related issues. I mean, doesn't matter whether it's an old or new home, or it's, it's not permissible now, but was permissible then. If it's unsafe, it's unsafe and should be corrected. So
let's talk about the decks, Ern, a minute. Because I'm looking at mine, right? So we have notched railings, which they don't do anymore, correct? So when they notch the wood in and bolt them in,
there's right and wrong ways to do it.
Right.
It can be done, but yeah.
And then the height of the railings and stuff like that. What are a couple of the common things you see on your regular inspections? I know what I hear a lot from the inspectors, the ridge vents and the roofs and stuff like that. Name a couple of things that you see on a regular basis that are commonly found that may be a safety hazard in a home inspection.
Yeah, I mean, to comment on the first thing you said, decks, they're a disaster most of the time. They're just so poorly built. I rarely find one that's good. So,
but we talk about bolting them. I learn a lot, Bay, when I'm listening to Ernie and go through these houses. But talking about lag bolting them properly to the frame of the house. My old partner, Peter O'Brien, who Ernie, his niece, who was a big time, I think lacrosse or soccer player, I think it was at UCLA, was on a deck in the Jersey Shore, and the deck imploded like up against the house because it wasn't properly bolted to the frame of the house. And it was too much weight on it, and she got seriously injured.
Yeah, that's probably the most critical issue is the attachment to the structure. But there's a whole host of others, and I've done a couple of YouTube videos on it just because it's kind of, it gets to be comical when you can point out more things that are wrong than are right with something. So yeah, that's a major safety concern is deck construction and home inspections. The industry is going in a direction where they're really prioritizing deck inspections, to the point where they're offering, a lot of people are offering standalone deck inspections that sort of supersede the typical home inspection evaluation. There are new standards that are coming out to specifically address the safety problems with decks, so it's definitely something that's a pretty widespread problem. But a lot of other common things that come across are, seem to be with the major components like electrical, specifically, and my theory on that as an inspector is that for whatever reason, it seems to be one of the areas where homeowners feel the most comfortable tampering with things and sort of altering things. I don't know why, but
that's scary.
I don't touch it.
I agree. It's for whatever reason though, I just see where they're altering and tampering with things, and that's generally where they become unsafe.
Let's talk quickly about the brackets on the deck, because you need that full bracket where the beam goes in, and sometimes they're short. You know what I'm talking about? There's metal brackets that kind of hold
the joist hangers.
Right. And we notice a lot of them that aren't to code because they were shorter brackets. They didn't use the full length brackets. We see a lot of issues with decks. And I feel like people try to brush that under the rug, but it's a major safety issue that can cause you a lawsuit after the fact. If a home inspector points out a safety issue on the deck, it's something, to me, if it's a safety hazard, fire, tripping, personal safety hazard, it could be negotiated, but in most instances, the seller really should fix it to ensure they're conveying a safe house to the buyer.
Yeah, I see that a lot, as well as, they just get rusted out and they corrode and they deteriorate, and then they're no longer really serving the purpose.
And I got a personal one now regarding the decks. The new code is the support beams, I guess, in the front of the deck that hold the deck up have to be cemented with brackets now, right? They have to pour a footer, and then a beam has to go in a bracket, right? They pour these cement footers. Now that's what I'm noticing out here on all the new decks. They're pouring cement footers, that the beams aren't necessarily being driven straight into the ground, because then you see wear and rot, right before the beam penetrates the ground. Can you speak to, like, I'll give you an example. My deck's 22 years old. It still seems to be in good shape, but I'm concerned about potentially having to replace those support beams because they're not done to code and they're not on footers. Can you speak to that a little bit from an inspector standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, the vertical support post, it was common until, I mean, even in some areas today that you would, you'd pour your footing, which would be, 2 to 4 feet below the ground level, and then you would run a post down all the way through the soil. So you've got this section of wood post that's buried in the soil and getting wet every time it rains, and it would eventually rot. It's today that the design would have a raised footing, which would extend the concrete all the way up above grade, and then you would connect the wood post, and then it's out of the soil. And that's sort of what they would consider the best practice. But I still see the old way being done fairly regularly, even on some newer builds.
I guess it's up to the municipality too, what they're, as far as the inspection goes, if they're getting a permit for it.
Yeah, and there's not enough oversight in most areas on that, so they're not gonna nitpick about that sort of thing. To speak to that, I had an issue with a deck that was constructed like that was actually only about 8 years old, and I just made a comment to the clients about the fact that that those buried posts can rot. And it came up between the buyers and sellers as kind of an issue, a concern, and they wanted to have it checked. So they actually had somebody come out and dig down and check them, and they were completely rotted out. You could stick a screwdriver all the way through them, and these were 8-year-old pressure treated posts. So I mean, if you're talking a 10, 15, 20 or more year old deck that's built like that, there's a good chance you're going to have pretty deteriorated posts there.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And you're better safe than sorry with, especially an elevated deck. Let's say it like I have mine off my bedroom. It's a second floor deck off the bedroom.
Yeah.
Hey, Bay, what do we got? Any more questions for Ernie? I have a few more, but let Bay chime in here.
Yeah. So actually, my next door to me, I live in a townhouse development. Next door to me, we have a young girl. It's crazy. She's like 19, 20 years old. Just bought the house next door to us. And it was rented out for years. And her and her parents have been redoing the house. And they, like, for a month and a half, 2 months, been redoing it. But they started with, in the laundry room, they didn't realize, and the father, like, kind of opened up a can of worms where there was, like, all types of moisture in the laundry room, and then through the floor, everything was rotted. Like, and they had a home inspection. You would think something like that, wouldn't that be caught, you would think? Or is it something where it's just so hard? I don't know. You're talking about this red thing, like.
So do you think that was, you're saying that you think that was something related to maybe the dryer venting system?
Yeah. Yeah.
Too much humidity in the room.
Yeah, that's something that I come across quite a bit, where your dryer vent is either not venting properly or it's clogged up with lint or whatever, and it's not able to get rid of that moisture that kind of builds up, and then you can definitely turn into mold problems, or depending on where it was leaking, if it was leaking in the wall or ceiling cavity, and it could eventually rot out, or cause mold problems in those areas. Yeah, that's. The vents on dryers are severely neglected in most instances. The problem from a home inspection standpoint is that, they can be 10, 15, 20 feet long, concealed behind walls, ceilings, and you just can't really get a great look at them. You're just advising clients to make sure they're cleaning them very regularly. that they have the right type of vent, installed.
Mhm.
They're not all created equal. There's good ones and bad ones, and they can also be installed improperly, etc. So that's a major problem I find, and it causes a lot of fires. So it's definitely something that should be paid attention to.
So my grandfather was a fireman, and his dryer actually caught on fire because they didn't clean the lint properly in his house in
Yep.
Clifton.
Wow.
Also, regarding that, I noticed that the municipalities are putting some rules and regulations in their use of occupancies regarding dryer vents, and the fact that there needs to be a clean out, and it needs to be a hard pipe. They're going away from the um, accordion style pipes, that they want a hard vent pipe, and it needs to have a clean out in it so you can take it apart and access it and clean it out. So I do see some of the municipalities, especially in Southern Delco, the older areas, that they're putting that in the UNO, and they're inspecting it. Let's talk about, there's lawsuits I just heard are up 700%. Why is that? Because everybody's waiving a home inspection because someone decided that it was this irks me to death. Someone decided it was a good idea in order to get a leg up to get a property because it's a very tight market. Somebody came up with the idea that said, hey, I'll waive the home inspection. We'll take it basically, I don't like to use the term, but as is. Ernie mentioned a little bit earlier about risk mitigating. You want to risk mitigate the buyer, the seller, the agents, and everybody's involved in the transaction to make sure you're as transparent as possible, and that you're taking any potential risk from a legal standpoint, but also from a humanistic standpoint, that you want to convey a safe house.
Mhm.
So there's some, another thing is the most sued document was the seller's property disclosure. People don't know a whole lot. They're putting on what they know on the seller's property disclosure. If you settle on the house and you waive your inspection, and the seller, without malice, didn't know there was something wrong with it, and then a problem arises, well, if you paid as is, you didn't get a home inspection, and now you're stuck with the cost of potential major repair. I'll say this real quick. My mom's neighbor just bought, there was stucco and then stone. They were townhomes, and this one happened to be stucco. And they said if there's any water damage, and the people that were selling said yes, there was some water damage in the front window. We replaced the window and resolved the problem. No, it wasn't. The lady didn't have a home inspection. The front wood seal was rotted, and the water was still getting behind and coming down at the bottom of the windows behind the stucco and the wood seal plate, and getting down in behind the walls. Well, was there malice there for the people that put on the seller's property disclosure that they resolved the problem? Maybe, maybe not. You may get taken to arbitration through the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, but if you had Ernie Hermer over there doing a home inspection, he would have probably found it and said, hey, this is an issue. It can be fixed, but it was not resolved with the installation of the new windows. I always tell my sellers, let them do a home inspection. You can always say no to repairs that aren't major safety items, like Ernie separates stuff on his reports, but give them a chance to do their due diligence. So when we settle the transaction, we risk mitigated to the point that everybody had a chance to potentially unearth any problems with the house. I just had one in Philadelphia. It was a one in Port Richmond. We let them, it was 1900 built. It was a 120-year-old house. It was $500 worth of repairs. Everybody feels better now that there was nothing unknown. The inspector went through, like Ernie said, we had a little bit of electrical. We had a little bit of issue with the roof and the ridge vent, and that was it. We made the repairs. We settled on a house, and then we kind of risk mitigated that everybody did their due diligence. Ern, talk to us a little bit about that in the changing market, and about your offering of a pre-inspection for sellers that in this market, to me, might help them risk mitigate and give a little bit of transparency for the seller, maybe something they didn't know or they didn't put on the seller's property disclosure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes logical sense. The problem from an inspector standpoint is that it's been an uphill battle trying to convince mainly the realtors, the listing agents, that it's a good idea. I've taught classes on this. I've done all sorts of different education and had a lot of conversations, and there are some agents that sort of buy into that philosophy and conduct their business that way, but I would say the vast majority choose not to. And I've even heard feedback such as, "Hey, let the buyers find the problems. Let their inspector or let them deal with that. Rather than maybe having the opportunity to address issues before you list it. And before you potentially convey it to another person."
Do you think it's because of ignorance in the true definition of the word from the potential realtor's perspective? Everything's negotiable. In my opinion, why not have them have a look at it? And then you get a professional opinion. If you get the home inspector's opinion, and maybe something might need to be looked at a little further, and then you decide whether or not that needs to be done to convey the house safely, or something that can be done at a later time and the buyer could accept that, in its current condition. But I find it mind numbing that we wouldn't want and we take that code of ethics as a realtor, that we wouldn't want to let someone do a home inspection. So for everybody involved, had full transparency.
Yeah, again, I agree. I just think that there's two different types of realtors, and some think that way, and a lot don't. I mean, I just think that the biggest problem is that a lot of realtors see that as another hurdle to listing the house and getting to the table, and they would rather just kind of let the buyers deal with it.
I'm going to put you on the spot. We're not going to talk about names or anything like that, but look at his face. He's like, "Oh shit, Dan comes up with this off the wall shit." Do you notice veteran agents versus the newer agents with a different philosophy, but is it kind of a mixed bag?
I think it's a mixed bag. Again, I mean, whether they've been doing it for years or they're brand new, it's literally one or the other. It's either that you see the value in doing it that way, where you take the extra step, or you treat the inspectors and the inspection process as kind of an inconvenience and potentially a roadblock. So
I find like you don't come in as an inconvenience, Ernie. You come in as a third party professional looking to do due diligence on a property and make sure everybody, is armed with information that's valuable when you're, it might be the biggest purchase of people's lives when they're transferring a home from one party to another. I just feel like your service to me is a very important piece to the puzzle, and to cut that out, it's like taking a piece or two of the pie away. Like you're getting a 3/4 eaten pie.
No, I agree with you. I mean, and the sellers and the seller's agent, you're able to essentially transfer some of your liability to me as the inspector, and that's something obviously we accept. But yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously in your best interest as an agent to mitigate your risk as much as possible, yes. And if you can do that by putting on me, then that's fair.
I just feel like it gives us all an ease and a sense of, okay, we gave everybody their right to the inspection. Mm-hmm. We negotiated any potential issues, and now we can move on post-inspection phase and go on to the mortgage phase. Hey, Bay, any questions? I got one more that I have for Ernie too that I just
actually, Dan, it was I guess towards you, but what do you think the percentage is of people that really actually waived that home
right now? Right now, you ready? 90.
No,
they won't even take an offer. The agents have the couillons, to use an Italian term there, to say we're not accepting offers that don't waive inspections.
I thought you were going to say maybe 20%.
Nope, I'm old school, Century 21, old school. Dave Stinson, Ray McKinney, 45 years they owned a Century 21. Ray McKinney had one lawsuit in 45 years. You know why? They did business the right way. My wife says to me in jest, "Sometimes I think you don't want to sell houses." I am not going to put someone in a property that I wouldn't be in their shoes and be in their position. And that's why I surround myself with professionals. And when I want to talk to Ernie about it's good and bad and everything. Bo DeForge does my loans. I prefer Ernie for my home inspections to my clients, and there's a reason. They're highest ethical standard quality people off the job and on the job. And that's why I prefer to do business with them. And I highly recommend Ernie because of how he approaches the job, and it helps me as a realtor risk mitigate for my client when I'm bringing a buyer and I have to have a home inspection done, because there's good and bad everywhere. But Bay, there's so many problems you can't imagine. Ernie will tell you there's a million problems after the fact, and some of it could be small that get how do you word it, like get more hair because they say they think things that may or may not be true. Hey, we found this issue and the seller knew about it and they didn't tell me. Most people are stew nods. They don't even know what a hot water heater is. They don't know. If you let Ernie come through and do a home inspection, you're going to get information that you, without malice, didn't know. And then Ernie can bring it up. And people are afraid to have the discussion. The realtors have to understand the components of a home. I think Ernie spoke about his background. Both my grandfathers were builders, Joe Fasciola and Dan Pizzi. My dad's father was right off the boat from Italy. He was a stone mason. My grandfather did drywall, lath board, and stucco work. I had a little idea what I'm looking at. Am I an expert? No. But I can advise people and just give them, like Ernie does. Like I see something, I'll say, hey, when Ernie does the inspection, we'll point that out and have him look at it. Because we want to give people, sometimes the stuff is minor and it can be fixed and it's not a big deal. But if you settle on the house and it's after the fact, then people get crazy thinking that somebody lied, and it gets to be a bigger issue than it is. That's why I tell people, let them do the home inspection. You can say no. One thing though, if the home inspector finds something that's a safety issue or a hazard, you can't ignore it. If that deal falls through, it has to go on the seller's property disclosure because you know about it. If it's the realtor and or the seller, they have to ensure that it is disclosed properly. Anything else? But I want to ask Ernie about one thing here that I just came across. We just had one in Downingtown, Ern, and it was one of the houses that had water in the basement, and they had all new components put in: heater, air conditioner, hot water heater, all that stuff. The home inspector writes on the report, brand new heater went in September. Brand new heater. It looks as if the heater has deferred maintenance. We suggest a professional come out and look at it. Okay, man, it just went into September. There's no deferred maintenance. It's brand new. To me, you lose credibility, just like a realtor was. And you know me, I got all excited about it. It wasn't mine. It was one of the agents. I thought, what the hell is he looking at? I mean, this is what they asked for. Here's another thing. You only ask for safety items and hazard items, tripping, fire, anything like that, or something that's broke or the roof's leaking. This realtor, who's not educated, comes back and says, we want brand new hot water heater. We want a pan underneath the hot water heater. That's a choice thing. That's a preference thing. That's stupid plastic pan. They wanted them to take out the brand new hot water heater and put a plastic pan underneath. And they said, we want a licensed plumber to put the steam valve on the side of it. That comes up all the time. It's a safety hazard. Ernie knows it. If there's discharge from the hot water heater, that pipe needs to be along the side so it drains to the floor and doesn't burn anybody. But my kid can do that. I mean, not a licensed plumber is going to screw on a steam valve that's pre-made. And the guy wanted new insulation blown in the attic. So what happens is, if you don't have a good home inspector that articulates it, and you don't have a realtor that understands it, you get replied to inspections like this. And after seeing the guy said the heater has deferred maintenance, then that's when I get like, this is nonsense. And this is why people get upset with things, because they're not getting real information. Ernie's there to give his perspective of what he saw in the home inspection. Then if Ernie always tells us, if you have any questions, you call me, or articulate it to you verbally if you don't understand what I have in writing. So then when you go back to the other side, you can have a conversation, and be armed with the proper information. But I know, Ernie, it doesn't happen with you, but it happens. And like there's good and bad in the way inspectors articulate what should be done and what may be deferred maintenance, or maybe something that's just maintenance, like grading and stuff like that. We've had people ask for the whole exterior to be graded. generally a seller's not going to do that. It's something that you give them for informational purposes to say, hey, you might want to grade the water away from the house. What's your thoughts on stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, the home inspection industry is similar to the real estate industry, where there's a lot of turnover, and so you get a lot of inexperienced inspectors, just like you get a lot of inexperienced real estate agents. And I think that what you illustrated there is probably a product of, just an inexperienced inspector, because, when we go through training, one of the main things that is usually communicated to us is the risk mitigation. And so there are a lot of companies that I think kind of overblow that, and they're what you would call alarmists, and they just are there to try to point out and nitpick every little possible thing. And, that can convey the wrong message, obviously, to clients and to realtors. And then I think the second part of it too is a lot of times I'm surprised at how often the real estate agents for the buyers don't attend the inspections. And, that can be difficult when the agent and the client are trying to talk about a reply to the inspection, and the agent really doesn't know, firsthand anything that happened. So
that's a great point, because I've become much more learned in 17 years by following inspectors around and understanding what they're looking at and being able to articulate that to my client. But you always afford us the opportunity to go back to you and say, hey, Ern, you suggested this. Can you explain this a little further to me, even if I was at the inspection, so I could better articulate it to the other side of the transaction? I think the communication, verbal as much as the written communication, is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, you just flipped the question in my head, and you touched on it a little already with that the clients should be present with the home inspector. But how many times is the clients not present, as well as the real estate agent? Should they both be there?
Absolutely. You know why? First of all, if I'm paying Ernie for an inspection, and he's working on behalf of me, I'm there. I'm paying him.
Right.
He's working for me. He's a third-party independent inspector. So Dan Pizzi, my wife Julie, we're buying a house. I hire Ernie as the home inspector. Well, I'm paying him to come through the house I'm buying, and I'm going to live in, my family's going to live in. I want to make sure the place is safe, and I'm getting the information off of a professional inspector that I chose to do the home inspection. Ern, you can articulate it too. I find that right now, 6 out of 10 don't come. Oh, and these agents, oh, God forbid. I mean, no disrespect, but a lot of people are lazy. I've missed a couple because sometimes circumstance, but for the most part, I'm there because my fiduciary right is to my client, and I need to gather all the information to make sure they're armed as far as me representing them in the right way in the transaction. But what do you see on the street, or as far as people showing up to inspections?
Well, right now it's kind of a unique market. So I would say a much higher percentage than normal are not coming to the inspections. I mean, I do walkthrough consultations for a lot of people that are buying homes.
Articulate that a little bit, Ernie. When they're, hey, Bay, so what happens is, I'm going to just jump in so I can set this up. You don't have time. You have to put an offer in a waive inspection. So Ernie's offering walkthrough consultations. When you make your appointment to go look at the house, or follow-up appointment, you bring Ernie with you. And Ernie, I'll let you speak to it. He walks through the house with you and sees visually if he sees anything that might be a problem. Go ahead, Ernie.
I'm just walking through and being an extra set of eyes. A lot of times it's with the client, but a lot of times they're not even there. I'm walking through, and then I'll give them sort of a verbal opinion or verbal report of, any kind of concerns that I came across when walking through. It's limited, you're not walking on the roof, and you're not, pulling off electrical panel covers and that sort of thing. But, it's obviously a little more in depth than just an uneducated, layman walking through on their own. So,
and with people waiving 90% of inspections roughly right now, if I was going to say I'm going to waive inspections, I would at least want Ernie to walk through with me, because he has a trained eye to see, stuff that we may or may not be able to notice on our own because it's not our expertise. So there's a lot of risk mitigation that we should be doing. And I think I get upset with the board of realtors. We should have much more training around risk mitigation and education on home inspections. And I just think they should bring professionals in like Ernie and let them educate and speak to people about the real need. And we should be demanding home inspections on all of our, if it's a fixer upper and we know it's a for sale by owner and it's just a fixer upper, then that's fine. But I really think we need to, on if it's a, outside of that we really need to be, focusing on, for a lot of reasons like we discussed today, home inspections. We can go on forever. Go ahead, Bay.
We have a question from our buddy Hub.
And, I love Hub. Hey, Hub.
Which is going to lead into my question off of his question. And he said, is there problems with people replacing the old 70s wall paneling when they're remodeling? Which I was wondering even further with that. Is it more important to get the home inspected after a remodel? You know what I mean? Like, are people doing these remodels and not just doing like half-ass ones and not, you know what I mean? Like cutting corners. And so is it more important to definitely get the home inspection like after somebody remodeled to make sure it was done right? Or
what's your thought on that? Hub says, are there problems when people replace 70s picture frame wall paneling? Very common in remodels. You with us, Ernie?
Problems? No, I don't think I've come across really any problems. It can be a little laborious to try to remove all that old stuff and kind of strip it down and get new materials put up. But I don't think aside from just the labor that I've seen any problems with it necessarily.
So with home inspectors too, they're basically doing a semi-surface inspection where they're not kind of removing things. So, it's limited in its scope.
Yeah, and that's where the infrared comes in handy,
yes.
to try to get a little more invasive look without being invasive.
For example, if it's in a basement, there's paneling up and there's a window there. Is there moisture behind that paneling where water might have got down behind there from a window in a basement or something like that? Mm-hmm. So Ernie uses that infrared just to get a feel for maybe is there something further that should be looked into?
Yeah, or things that have been intentionally concealed. I've come across that various times where they've freshly painted over a big stain, or something like that, and that sometimes you need those tools to be a little bit more invasive.
It happens all the time. I mean, there's so many. I wanted to get you on and just kind of touch on this. Believe it or not, it's been 50 minutes. It flies by. Just get a feel for a lot of what's going on with the home inspections. Tell everybody where they can find you, Ernie. I highly respect and appreciate Ernie for what he does for my office and his level of professionalism. Tell them where they can find you. Anybody that's going to watch this podcast after the fact or tuned in tonight.
Yeah. So mainly I work through my website, www.homerinspect.com. I'm in the Philadelphia area and Wilmington, Delaware area. So I'm licensed in both states, and hopefully South Jersey sometime in the near future.
And let me interject real quick. He goes everywhere like me. If I asked him to go to Lancaster to Philadelphia, and we've done ones all over, Ernie will go. Some guys will say, I won't only go here, I'll only go there. But within reason, Ernie's pretty good on where he'll go.
Yeah, especially for good agents like yourself.
No, I appreciate it. And he always brings me good pizza. He knows I like Greek-style pizza. So when he comes and sees me, we have some good pizza from a place in Westchester that I actually passed the other day. And
which spot?
Tell him, Ernie.
New Haven.
New Haven. It's good. Oh, I'll say this and we'll get off of here. My favorite pizza parlor since 1983 just closed, Lafayette Pizza. It was the best Greek pizza in the world. Perry's wife got sick and they closed after 40 years. And I was heartbroken. So now New Haven's got to replace them because there's very limited Greek style pizza around.
You know who had good pizza in Westchester? I used to get from is it Limoncello?
Oh yeah,
restaurant.
I have a gift card there, Ernie. We can go there. It's sitting in my thing. So
right.
It's about 4 blocks from my office. There's 2. There's Limoncello, Westchester, and there's one out in Exton area. So we're good for food all the time. Ernie, thank you, buddy. I greatly appreciate you. hopefully
Nice
we can
meeting
get
you,
you
Aaron.
some more inspections, and I'll be in touch with you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks again. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Ernie. Thank you, buddy.
Take care.
All right, have a good one.
We got one more question from Hub. This one's for you,
Yeah,
Dan.
I love Hub. What's up, man? Oh, Huntington Valley. I tell you what, I do the least amount of my business in that Montgomery County area. I've been up there before. My aunt lived up that way. We do some business up there. I sell everywhere from Lancaster to Philadelphia. I'll go anywhere. So we sold up off of 611 up that way. We've sold that whole area in the past. My aunt lived up there, so I've sold a few homes up there. But I educate myself on. My dad worked for SEPTA, so we were always all over the place. So I educate myself on if I don't know the area intimately, and you want me to do business in that area, I make sure that I get as learned as possible. Like if you take me down to Southern Delco, you can blindfold me. I can tell you every store, everything, every single thing. Philadelphia, I can tell you every ethnic market, all the different places to eat because I'm very familiar. I think my comfort level, Delaware County, Chester County. Now I'm out here 20 years. Philadelphia, because my dad worked for SEPTA in South Philly, so I was always down in that area. We do some things in Montgomery and Bucks County, but my sweet spot for me is Delaware County and Chester County. Hey, Hub, we appreciate you always listening to the podcast every month. Tell your friends, as they say. So we're trying to get our viewership up here, and hopefully we're bringing informative content back to these people. Hopefully the Whalers come back in the next few years. They're talking about expansion. We'll play the Flyers.
Can you believe it? Okay, yeah.
There's been a lot of talk. So we got.
But I'm sure they won't be in the Civic Center inside the mall anymore.
No. It was just that's why they left, because they wouldn't build them a new arena, and that's why. So every year down in Carolina, my son was just showing me they have Whalers Night. So the Carolina Hurricanes wear the Hartford Whalers uniforms. They have the mascot, Whaley, the old mascot. They play the song that I was playing for Bay before we came on the air. So tonight's Game 4 of the NHL Finals. We'll watch that. The Phillies were on. Let's see what the Phillies are doing before we leave here tonight. Let's see where the Phillies are at here, how they're making out here. They weren't doing too good. They were down 3-2 when we joined the podcast. We needed a win today. Up 4-2 Texas in the 8th. Phillies got a man on. I always appreciate this every month, Bay. Hopefully we can bring more informative information to people. I know we mix it up. We do some wrestling. We do some sports. I thought the home inspection was very pertinent in this time frame in the real estate business, and I wanted to bring Ernie on to talk about it.
Dan, I can't tell you how blown away I am that 90% of the people waive that freaking inspection.
And you know how many problems they find after the fact?
I'm sure.
I told my mother, have your neighbor, with all due respect, file a grievance. One of the reasons you hire a realtor is because you can file a grievance with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors and go through an arbiter instead of you having to file a civil claim if you didn't hire a realtor. Because I feel like even though people say they fixed something, by waiving the home inspection, that you're leaving too much open to the unknown. And one thing I'm doing now, if our buyers decide to waive the home inspection and waive the appraisal sometime, they're signing a hold harmless. Not on me. I'll never tell you not to get a home inspection.
Yeah.
I have a fiduciary right to my client and to their client, because I always hold myself accountable to everybody in the transaction and make sure that we're as transparent as possible. I'd rather lose a deal and take the money off my plate than put someone in a position that none of us want to be in. And that's we have the highest ethical standard, or you won't work for my office. No way, go to another office. I mean, we just won't. And we have even the littlest thing, we're not going to do it. And people that work with us know, hey, Dan, everything's on top of the table, as I tell them. We got a strict ethical standard. Would you buy a house, Bay? You're finally going to afford to buy a house. You go out and buy a $350,000 house on average, and you're not going to do an inspection? You know what I put on there now, Bay?
Unbelievable.
What I put now. Inspection for informational purposes for the buyer. So it gives the buyer an out, but it also allows them to do an inspection, but they can't ask for any repairs. So if they see any repairs that might be alarming to them, they say, I'm out. Sell it to somebody else. I'll tell you what, one of my agents just had one that the stucco was bad. It was known that the stucco was bad. It was going to be $150,000 to repair the stucco. Somebody still bought the house. the waters. They already did the infrared. They already did the intrusive stucco report. Put it on the listing. People knew that the house had major issues regarding the stucco, and they still bought it. Evelyn, one of my agents, Evelyn, offered on a house. She offered they offered a reasonable price, knowing that the stucco had to be repaired. Somebody bid way more than that. So right now we still have a very haphazard, uneven market. That's why the lawsuits are up 700%. And I'll tell you, you need a good inspector, just like you need a good realtor. Ernie says this is the maintenance items; these are the serious items. And Ernie, one thing about him, it's key. He articulates it in layman's terms, and because we're not contractors. How do you know? Some people don't even know what an air conditioner is, Bay. They don't even know what the outside condenser is. I had a guy point to me and say, "What's that?" And I'm blunt. I'm from Falkirk. I'm looking around saying, "What is he talking about?" I said, "That right there." He said, "Yeah." I said, "That's an air conditioning condenser unit. That's your outside unit." And he said, "I didn't know what that was." So that's why you hire Ernie, because he does know what it is, and he's going to articulate it to you in layman's terms and arm you with information. Because when you're buying a house and it's the biggest purchase of your life, you want somebody to articulate in not a derogatory way, but an informative way, and give you the information you're going to need to get to your end goal.
Yep.
And for us, it is a business, but we also have that fiduciary right to our clients and to the other clients, to either the buyer or the seller, to make sure that we're putting people in the proper position. So, that's why I wanted to have her. I can't believe how fast the time flies by.
Oh, yeah.
A handful of questions. Whew, and the time just flies by. So, hey, real quick, what's coming up on the network? You got any guests coming up?
So I've been laying low the last few weeks.
I noticed that.
But part of the reason is, I have had some things going on, but my next episode is episode 100.
Wow.
So,
you better pick a good guest for that.
Yeah, well, you know what? What I used to do when I used to do the Totally Driven Radio was, like, if it was like the 100, the 200, 300th episode, I would do like a cavalcade of guests and have like 10 to 15 guests, and like every 10 minutes have them come on. So I think I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to line it up for next week and put the game in motion.
Looking forward to that. Totally Driven TV, correct? Totally Driven Entertainment Radio. Look for Bay's past shows and future shows on his YouTube channel. You can find our podcast on there as well.
Absolutely.
I know we were a week late this month, so we'll get back in line next month. We'll line up a good guest, and we'll. Did you see that the guy who used to be on the Ravens passed away? Italian
the Goose.
Guy.
Tony
Goose. Yeah. My wife just told me before we jumped on the podcast, he's a big guy. I felt bad. He must have had a heart attack or something.
That's what I'm guessing. But I'll tell you what though. He was like such a funny guy.
Remember him on the sideline? He was great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he did like some reality shows, and
and he was on the Sopranos. He was on the Sopranos a little bit too. Yeah.
Yep.
I was just reading about it. They didn't say cause of death, but life is precious, and you got to take every day and enjoy it, even in these tough economic times. But hey, appreciate you, and best of Coco as usual, and we'll see you next month.
You got it.
All right, buddy. Thanks again. Take care.